So hi there, welcome back to the Fuse Show. I'm David Tran, one of the co-hosts of this show. I'm also the co-founder of Xfusion, and today I'm excited to be joined by my friend Sebastien van Heyningen, and he is a president of CentralMetric, a management consulting firm that specializes in optimizing the way that companies build and scale revenue teams. He's an SDR Demand Gen Lead turned into RevOps Consultant. He's also a DJ, writer, and future NFL team owner.
One day.
So Sebastien, at what point did being a future NFL team owner enter your mind?
That's actually, I'm glad you asked about that. And it's a funny story. When I was in school, my first, what I want to be when you grow up was a sports agent. And so, I wanted to, Jerry Maguire was a movie that I watched way too many times, Show Me the Money. And so I kind of went through the college process and applied to a bunch of sports-centric schools, and I didn't get into any of them. The only school that I got into, which was a great school, mind you, NYU, but they did not give a rat's ass about sports in any way, shape, or form. And so I kind of had to shelf the sports agent idea for a while. I'm from Boston, so I'm a Patriots fan. And so one of my aspirational people is Robert Kraft, because he took a team that was essentially a laughing stock in the NFL and turned it into one of the most valuable sports franchises on earth, regardless of sport. And so I saw that, and I really, really emulated well with me, and it kind of stuck with me. And so I decided, that's what I want to do. I want to be the team owner, the team CEO. When the team wins the Super Bowl, the person that gets the trophy first is the team owner, and they get to hold it up. And although they didn't play and they're not coaching, and they probably couldn't tell you the difference between this defense or that defense, they are the lead executive responsible for the success of the team. And that really stuck with me. And I kind of try to bring that wherever I go.
How old were you when you first thought about that?
Probably like 17, 18. Yeah,
So
maybe
since
a decade or so ago.
since being a teenager, you knew you wanted to be an executive of some kind.
Yeah,
Okay.
essentially.
Did you
Maybe I was
anticipate
just full of myself.
Did you anticipate you take the path that you have taken thus far?
About 6 months into my first gig, I realized that I am not a good employee. And so the only other alternative was an executive.
Well, let's break that down. Why did you not feel like you were a good employee?
Well, it's kind of like you point me in a direction and tell me what to do, and I can do it, but I will be asking why. And I will be interrogating how we're getting here. And I want to be kind of the saying I always said is I'm on the wrong side of the glass. I don't want to be on the other side of the conference room. A lot of talking happens, a lot of planning happens. They come out and say, here's what we're doing. I want to be in the planning sessions. I want to, my perspective to inform the direction that we're going, or else how am I going to buy in? I don't even know where we're going or why. And that always is something I struggled with as an employee. And I think it came up, actually, if you ask every boss I ever had, they'd probably give you that same feedback, that I just was asking too many questions and wasn't able to just stick into my lane.
It's really interesting you mentioned that, because I feel like there's so many companies out there that probably would really appreciate that more freestyle, inquisitive mind. I feel like,
Yeah.
I guess that's where being a consultant comes into play. You're kind of effectively you're working within a subset of, kind of like a start within each company that you work at. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. And now that mindset is very helpful, because we'll be onboarding a client and we'll discover something that if we didn't discover it now, then it would have caused us trouble in 3 to 6 months. Or I'll kind of help guide a strategy that was mid-development, even though we came into the project a little bit late. So yeah, it's very, very helpful as a consultant.
How did you gain the skills to become a consultant, and then how did you find your first few customers?
Yeah, so all credit goes to my experience, as an SDR several times over, and then more relevant experience working under Jake Dunlap at Scaled. So he is one of the leading consultants on LinkedIn, one of those top voices. And I was lucky enough to have a connection at Scaled who brought me on. And a few projects in, I was essentially learning directly under a leading sales consultant. And that's the best way to teach me is through osmosis. Like even in my first SDR job, I was just sat next to the top performer and my manager just said, look at him, do exactly what he does every day. And that's kind of how I built my own version of success. And so being just right under Jake and working with him directly every day and, getting to pick his brain on why he's doing the things he's doing, that all fed into kind of the way that we do our business and run our business now.
If you had just ballparked the magnitude of questions you asked him, is it in the matter of like dozens, hundreds, thousands, maybe?
Probably thousands.
Thousands. Okay.
Yeah, probably. But over like 2.5 years.
Right. I hope it's not
time.
Hey, I have 1,000 questions for you on day one.
Yeah. I'll save those for later on.
What were some of the things? Like, what were some of your best takeaways that you've learned through osmosis?
Wow. That's a good one. I'm trying to rifle through them. I think really it is just the process of making things easy. Like with sales, we're not convincing people to do things that they wouldn't do.
Right.
We're just presenting an alternative and showing them the path to get there. Like at Scaled is where I really learned sales as project management rather than, trying to convince somebody or, twist their arm and bring them forward. And so that's one of the main takeaways. It's like, if you want somebody to buy something, make it easy. If you want somebody to download your content, don't lock it behind a form with 89 fields so that you can track them and send them a bunch of emails they're not going to read anyway. Just give them the content. Just offer it to them and they will come back for more. The content is not enough to, solve their problem.
So
that's just one of them.
I hope there's thousands more as well for each of those 1,000 questions you asked. So at what point did you feel the confidence where you're like, I've learned enough to start my own journey? And how'd you know?
I don't think I'm there yet.
Okay.
I wouldn't say I'm. Imposter syndrome is something myself and my co-founder deal with every day. Especially with our age group. We're working with CROs and company founders that this is their third or fourth company. They've been to business school. They're 40 plus years old. So it really is. The validation comes in through the work. When I suggest something that hasn't been tried before, or when an idea of mine works really well, that's when I feel like I'm ready. But, up until that point, it's kind of a little bit of a scramble, right? It's like, I need to know these things so much better than people that have been doing it longer than I have. And so how do I find the scrappy, the forward thinking, the innovative approach to, something that's been done for thousands of years, right? Sales is not a new practice. It's something that, has been around as long as capitalism has been around. So that's really kind of where the validation comes from. It's like when the work goes well. And so that's why I'm always open to adding an advisor or a mentor. And, I count myself lucky, again, having a very strong network where if I see something that I don't understand, I have a kind of room full of people that I can talk to about that.
So I recognize that sales is probably one of the oldest industries. I think revenue operations is probably an industry, or at least a term that's lesser known. Just for the sake of our audience, can you just break it down into what is revenue operations and why should companies care?
Yeah. Well, I think one interesting thing is everyone will have a different definition of revenue operations, which I love, absolutely. It's different in every company. But kind of my overarching definition, and I'll be as wide ranging as possible, is revenue operations is the kind of organization, integration, and documentation of all of the technology and process that leads to revenue. So from the point where nobody knows who you are to the point where that same person is a recurring, renewing customer, there is a website, a marketing automation platform, a sales engagement platform, a CRM where all the data lives, an internal database, a product, like all of that technology has to work together, or else it will naturally start to eat each other. The data in one platform won't get to another. You'll make a wrong decision. You'll turn left when you should have turned right. So revenue operations is kind of just corralling all of that data, all of that technology, and the process that drives it into one place, one coherent place, so that everybody's rowing in the same direction and at the same pace.
What would you say the primary difference is between a sales executive and a revenue operations executive?
Yeah, I think the simple answer to that is, if you think of the sales process of marketing leading to sales, leading to customer success, sales is 1/3 of that. Revenue is the whole thing.
I see.
So,
yeah. Okay. And what would you think, or what should a leader in revenue operations, the day-to-day look like?
Yeah, that could be a million different things. It could be importing data into your CRM. It could be reporting on the last few months of opportunities. It could be installing a new piece of technology. But really, like the analogy that really sticks with me really well is that of a pit crew. So in the case of like NASCAR or F1, they are the experts that understand above all else, how does this car work? They're not driving the car, and whenever somebody needs to make a change to the car, they need to run it by the pit crew. We're going to turn an extra few degrees on this turn. Can the car handle it? We're going to accelerate at this pace. Do we have enough gas to make it there? So really, it's kind of the filter through which all decisions should be made in a technology-driven organization.
So in an ideal world, would the leader of sales report to the leader of revenue operations in your mind? Or is it the other way around, or are they parallel?
I think they're parallel paths. I think they both sit in the C-suite. So, the revenue operations leader or the revenue leader might contribute strategy. The sales leader might contribute strategy. And so the sales leader tells the revenue leader how the sales team will handle that. And the revenue leader tells the sales leader how the technology and process will handle that. So it very much is a collaborative effort. And they both kind of sit in the same space, in my opinion, at least.
One thing you mentioned earlier is how you work with a lot of entrepreneurs who was not their first rodeo. What is it that you think you do that compels these people to want to work with your firm?
Yeah, I think it's just a mindset of continuous improvement. This is an industry that's moving beneath our feet. Even over the last 2 years, all of a sudden everyone's going remote. Zoom has become very popular. Physical in-person SKOs have declined. So these things are changing whether we notice or not. And so I think really kind of what I do differently from most is I'm tapped into those changes, and in some cases even pushing those changes forward, and just always trying to figure out what is the non-classical way of doing this. Like, yes, we could do it the way we've always done it, but is there a cheaper way? Is there a faster way? Is there a better way, a more efficient way to do that? And without that mindset, you kind of get stuck on the same spot.
Out of the clients you've worked with, what is their typical type or size or whatever? What are some of the common parameters they can be bucketed into, if at all?
Yeah, I think we do our best work with small growing teams. So 5 to 10 sales reps, maybe one person in charge of ops, or 0 people in charge of ops. A sales leader that is not a technician, or a company leader that is not a sales leader. So people that kind of just have those natural gaps that, usually a smaller company does not have the resources to fill with a full-time hire. And then, of course, like every company, we're trying to go up market. So for those larger companies, we do well and work well with folks that have a very specific and defined problem, because then we could just charge right at it, rather than trying to come up with what to do from scratch.
And what point would someone usually work with a consultant versus trying to brainstorm it in-house? What are some signs that you think a company should consider a consultant?
Yeah, I think if you are spending too much time on a certain business task or area, and you cannot afford to bring on a full-time hire for that role, you need a consultant.
Hmm.
Or if you just brought on a full-time leader to decide what your strategy is, but you can't really staff their team up yet, same thing. Or if everyone in your organization has a defined role and a new challenge pops up that was not anticipated, again, you would need a consultant. So it's usually one of those three, at varying levels of urgency and kind of company size. But it's pretty much like you need an extra set of hands, but you can't just spend the next 3 months onboarding somebody, interviewing them, making sure they're a good fit, getting them started, going through alternatives. And so, by the time you get to the end of that hiring process, nothing has happened and they're starting from scratch. And now a 3-month problem becomes a 9-month problem. That's really what a consultant is for, is to shrink the time that it will take for you to deal with that problem, and set things up so that when a new hire comes in, they're not going back and correcting all the work that was done. They can just start and kind of take off from where they're at.
If you were to summarize it down to one benefit, what is the number one win that your clients get from working with companies like yours?
Yeah, it's the ability to know what the hell is happening every day. This is actually something that I think revenue operations leaders are going to have to figure out. And it's not a new problem. It's the problem of ROI, right? What is the ROI of adding a cost that before the cost, you didn't know how much the cost would be worth it? Like, we give people that visibility into their data, the ability to make decisions based on that data. And so, how do we prove ROI when we didn't know ROI as a business before this consultant came on? So that's really kind of one of the things that we're struggling with, is like, how do we quantify the value of revenue operations? How do you quantify the value of knowing how to quantify your business? It's kind of a meta problem.
What are some of the common mistakes that you've seen companies make in the domain that you consult in?
Yeah, I mean, I think hiring people to solve a tech problem is, I think, the main problem that I see. Like, a lot of founders, they don't have demand, so they hire an SDR. Like, okay, what is that SDR supposed to do? Just cold call strangers endlessly until something comes in? So you hired a person, but what you really have is a demand gen problem. Instead, you should invest in things that bring in leads, and then once those leads come in, you bring someone on to qualify and sell to those leads. Another is adding too much tech too fast. A lot of folks, they get, bought in by the bells and whistles. They think Salesforce is the end all be all. And, I'm going to have a sales organization, so I better buy Salesforce, Marketo, and SalesLoft. So now you have 3 tools that you don't know how to use. They're not connected, and you have a new problem, which is all of your data is disparate. None of your processes are consistent, and you don't know what's working. It would have even been better to keep things analog, keep things manual, until the need arises, rather than trying to anticipate that need and just throwing tech at it. So I think it's just a lack of awareness of requirements is what both of those problems boil down to. It's like figuring out why you need a person and why you need a piece of technology before just bringing it on. And I think that's partly because of these sales, technologies and revenue technologies. They have really good sales processes. They're very good at convincing somebody that you need this thing or else you will lose money every month. And so people almost get scared into just adding a bunch of technology, throwing a bunch of people at the problem and saying, I don't know why it's not working.
So what is in the domain of demand gen that you feel like entrepreneurs should be tackling before they hire their first SDR? Because I see that quite commonly, and I think that's a mistake I've made at parts of my history as well. What have you seen across all of your clients?
Yeah, I mean, as soon as you can establish yourself as a domain expert, the demand problem kind of handles itself. People are already trying to answer the questions that you have the answers for. So you just need to figure out where they are and show up. as a trusted and valued resource. I sell to salespeople, so I'm in RevGenius, the RevOps Co-op. I am posting on LinkedIn about sales and revenue. I'm connecting with sales and revenue leaders. So by the time I speak with somebody, they can already reasonably assume that I know what I'm talking about. And they want to take that call whether or not they are interested in my product or service. I think that's really the most important thing from my time as an SDR is like when you're reaching out, what value does somebody get if they don't buy? And if you can make that clear, then you'll have too many meetings. And those meetings will turn into too much revenue and so on and so on and so on.
So if you were to, I guess, group the sourcing of your current clients, what are some of the primary channels they come from? Is it from those communities that you engage in? Is it people who saw that content and came to you? Like what's working and what would you recommend?
Yeah. So first off, we started as freelancers. So the network was the first, best place for us. People that I've worked with, old mentors and advisors, people that I've hired at various roles. When they have a need related to what I do, they raise their hand and tell me. So that's kind of where the bedrock of our demand came from. Recently, I have actually been having people reach out to me cold on LinkedIn and say that they saw my post or somebody that I connected with suggested me and they want to talk about the problems that I solve. And then, of course, those communities, providing quote unquote free value, answering questions in those Slack channels, connecting with the leader of those groups and saying, hey, this is one of the things we're experts in. If somebody asked about it, talk to me. So again, it's just showing up where people are already looking for the answers to these problems.
And I imagine that takes a fair amount of time for it to actually start to compound, as well as it takes time to be seen as an expert. How long, in terms of either hours per week, did you invest in the very beginning, and how long did it take for it to pay off?
Yeah, I think my case is a little bit different from most software companies because I was always a salesperson. Whether I was selling HR technology or payroll and benefits technology or marketing automation technology, at every step of the way, I had to connect with and learn from sales leaders. So as soon as I began to service those sales leaders, I already had the network there. So it was kind of it was already baked into what I was doing. So the short answer is it took me 8 years because that's how long my career has been. But in terms of intentional action towards that goal, it's been about a year for me, or maybe a year and a half of consistent searching for that place, whether it was, we partner with Mass Challenge, the accelerator, RevGenius and RevOps Co-op that I mentioned, doing blog posts and podcasts and events. And so kind of just creating that groundswell around both my name and the company name, about a year and a half.
How long, in terms of hours per week now, how much time do you invest into that?
Yeah, that's most of what I do.
Okay.
Solid, well, not most, I'd say 15 to 20 hours a week of, LinkedIn and community and follow-ups and meetings based on all of that. So yeah, 15 to 20 hours a week.
If you were to commit that, call it 15 to 20 hours per week, every week for multiple years across multiple industries and wherever else you would choose to go in the future, how long do you think it would take for you to become or to have the level of wealth to buy an NFL team?
Oh man, I think damn, that's a great question. I don't know. I don't think there's one straight path to the level of wealth that I'm trying to achieve. And I think if there was a straight path, it would not be a services-based business. It would be a software-based business. So I think this, similar to how my SDR career was the bedrock of the demand for this business is really the bedrock for me building that wealth. After 2 or 3 years of this, I'm now not only a RevOps consultant, I'm a business advisor. I've founded a business successfully, bootstrapped it, found funding, and had it run, and grow every year for the last 2 or 3 years. So now my profile can kind of improve. Now I can really get into those rooms where they are discussing the big money things. Now I have the window into those VC firms. Now I have the relationships with the banks that will loan me the money that will build the business, which will get me the wealth. And maybe it's real estate, maybe it's crypto, maybe it is a software in the revenue operations space. I'm not sure what that is yet, but kind of this is that launch pad, that jumping off point that kind of legitimizes me as a player in this world, really. That's the way I see it.
Okay. Are there some low-hanging fruit that you feel like software could tackle in this space, that you feel like people are throwing too many people at the problem versus like trying to automate some things?
I think that the current landscape of revenue operations technology has done a great job at grabbing that low-hanging fruit.
Okay.
So yeah, I think maybe there's room for productizing RevOps consulting, having a branded platform where your Salesforce, your Slack, and your SalesLoft are all integrated with a project management tool so that you have live real-time updates on how we're changing your reports or integrating your software, for example. So I think there's room there, but every marketing, sales, and success challenge that I have come across at all of my clients and in my career in general, there is a software out there that was built to solve it. So I think the low-hanging fruit has been picked.
Do you have, at least amongst those that have already been picked, do you have like some favorite softwares that you like to genuinely recommend or implement for your clients?
No, we're software agnostic. Yeah, I want to know what you need first before saying a favorite tech. I mean, there are some brand names. I think there are some companies that are doing well. Like Chili Piper comes to mind. Like it seems like they've cornered the market on, meeting setting and kind of notifications around that, and they integrate really well. I think, for every Dooley, Scratchpad, or similar, there's another one, and some of them are doing better than others. So like again, it's like let's get the requirements first, and then we can talk about what my favorite software is, for that exact problem, because it's such a large landscape that I could say this is my favorite software to solve X, but somebody who does it differently is going to feel completely differently about that.
So when you work with a client, how many people within their team would you generally like work with? Is it usually one person? Is it 10? Like what's the range?
Yeah, it's usually between, we touch every part of the team, so it could be the entire team. But really our point of contact is usually the sales leader, the operations leader, or the company owner. One of those three, and then we kind of cascade down from there. We might work with a sales manager to update their weekly reports. We might train reps individually on how to use technology based on the process that we built. But really, all roads lead back to the CRO, the director of sales, or the founder and CEO.
If someone were want to learn more about this field, what are some good resources that you'd have in mind for them? Are there specific like books or podcasts or I don't know, like resources that you usually like to point to?
Yeah, I think LinkedIn is the best place to start, and kind of from LinkedIn you can figure out what niche you want to break into. But I think the best thing to do is just follow people that are leading in the space. And it might be hard to find that because everybody's going to say that they're leading in the space, and some of them are more technical than others. So, again, back to that same thing, like what are your requirements? What exactly are you trying to learn? Find somebody who is solving that problem, and then they will share the resources that they use to learn that problem. They will put out content that helps solve that problem. Maybe their whole business is built around solving that problem. So it's kind of a mixture of the people, the company behind them, the content that both are putting out, and then again, shameless plug for communities like RevOps Co-op and RevGenius, because that's where people are actively talking about this stuff.
As a person, do you have a favorite book, be it fiction or nonfiction?
Yes, my favorite book is Thank You for Arguing by Heinrichs.
That's an interesting title.
Yeah, yeah. It's all about just the art of rhetoric and kind of the ability to, some people they conflate argument with fight. I think when you argue, you are trying to change someone's mind or produce an action from somebody. It doesn't have to be emotional. It could be a logical argument. It doesn't have to be charged with emotion. And so really that book taught me, one, the difference between an argument and a fight, and two, how to use arguments to, draw people to action or increase your social status, or the list goes on, and it's kind of a whole book of tips and tactic. It's very tactical. It's like, for example, if you want somebody to go to the movie that you want, how do you position that so that they decide to watch this movie? And it's not you telling them, I want to watch this movie. It's like, kind of peppering them with questions or showing them value in some way so that they come to the conclusion that you already wanted them to. And so that has been valuable in sales. It's been valuable in interpersonal relationships. It's been valuable in my career in general. Just, I always recommend people to read that book, no matter what they do in their day to day.
And the last question I have for you is, what's a lesson you've been learning recently that you wish you learned a long time ago?
Oh, man. My co-founder is going to laugh at this one. The lesson I've been learning recently that I should have learned a long time ago is that when you want to start a business, the most important thing that you can have is capital. We were so proud to build a bootstrap business that we didn't have funding, we didn't take a loan, we kept 100% ownership. That's hard to do. If we had, for example, a line of credit with a bank or a venture capital firm to throw cash at us, we could scale so much faster. But with a company of our size and kind of our scope right now, it's easy to get stuck in your own billings because you can't grow past what you're charging, and you can't scale past the work that you're already doing. How can I hire people to do work for projects that are in pipeline if those projects aren't going to pay off for another month and the work needs to start yesterday? So that's really the lesson I've learned. Just as a business owner, the money comes first. Find that money one way or another before you jump into, trying to grow and scale your business. I think there's value in taking time and figuring out your operations before you take that, influx of capital. But if you're going to grow, you're going to need money to do it. And so you're either going to need to charge way too much, or you're going to need to have somebody drop some money on you, whether it be a loan from a bank, a private equity firm, a venture capital investment, et cetera, et cetera.
Would you go back and do things differently, either in taking a loan or raising capital, if you do it all over again?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think if we could have done things differently, we would have got a loan last year this time, or even 2 years ago. Whereas now it's like we have to wait until the end of the year so we have a full year of revenue, and things get complicated too quickly. So yeah, I would definitely have focused more on acquiring capital to grow my business before it was necessary.
So I'm familiar, for a lot of product-based businesses, it's important to have that capitalization before you get started. How would you deploy capital in a service-based business if you had, call it like $1 million in a loan?
Yeah, I mean, first I would go poach the best CRM experts out there, and I would set them up on a comfortable salary and tell them that they're going to work 3 to 5 clients for us for the next year. So I would have that bench of people ready. Then I would do investment, probably in paid advertising around this space, because we already have the strong SEO and content presence. And then I would likely create or begin ideating a software that solves a consistent common problem that we see. Because then once we have that software, that million turns into 10, that 10 turns into 50, and then we can grow accordingly.
Can you remind me, what is the price of an NFL team?
I believe, actually, I'm gonna look this up. Actually.
Okay.
I think the cheapest NFL team is probably $2.27 billion.
So you're telling me I just need
So
to create a few meme coins, own 20%, and I can buy an NFL team.
yeah. If you bought 100 Bitcoin 10 years ago, you can afford an NFL team, probably.
Well, Sebastien, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. I'd love to give you the platform now. For the people who want to find out more about revenue operations, about what you do, or just follow you personally, what's the best way for them to do so?
LinkedIn. LinkedIn's the best way. I am on LinkedIn every day for several hours. Connect with me, comment on my posts, send me a message. Like, that's the best way.
Sounds good. Well, thank you again so much for your time.
And thanks for having me.